All right, we are going to get started. Welcome to everybody to the Teaching and Learning Center's Professional Development Series. We're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement.
Okay, can you see what I want you to see right now, at least? Okay, perfect. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. My name is Don Saucer. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. You found our Professional Development Series. We meet in real time over Zoom at noon on Wednesday, every week of the semester. We also record these for asynchronous viewing. So if you have a colleague who's going to benefit or you want to go back and review these again, these are available on the TLC webpage. We also offer professional development certificates for both graduate students and faculty or staff. And my colleagues have just dropped that information into the chat for you to explore if you would like. We also grant fellow status to people who enhance the teaching excellence at K-State. So you can check that out as well if you are interested. Next week, I always talk about next week first, we're going to have Serena Maniotis talk about what job design can tell us about online teaching and learning. Online teaching and learning is a big part of what we do these days. So we're very excited to hear that. But today, I'm very excited to welcome Andy Thompson from the Office of Student Life, soon to have a different name. And he's going to talk to us about how we follow through in the promise of support. And one of the things that I often say about Andy is that when you find someone who is just perfectly suited to their job, that is a wonderful thing. And I love hearing Andy talk about how we support our students through all of their trials and tribulations. And I think he is the perfect person to give our conversation today. So Andy, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Don. I really appreciate it. I think this is my 6th year giving this kind of talk on how we do this. So I appreciate getting welcomed back every year. And for those of you that are joining over your lunch hour, I appreciate you taking time and being here. For those of you that are on my staff, I'm not sure why you hear me talk enough. So, I mean, I really appreciate you coming and putting yourself through this some more. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you all have got my PowerPoint, and that'll help keep me. All right. Are you all seeing the PowerPoint slide there? Good. I see Ashley's thumb up. Thank you. Yeah, I do want to go and acknowledge what Don said. So the Office of Student Life, part of the change that's coming with the Division of Student Life merging with Academic Success into the Division of Academic Success and Student Affairs, I believe is where we are, is we're getting an office name change to the Office of Student Support and Accountability. And so that we're kind of slowly working that title in. So if you start seeing stuff from the Office of Student Support and Accountability, that's just the Office of Student Life. And we'll make sure at all of our communications that we've got kind of formally OSL in there so folks know you're talking to the same shop, just different name underneath that. So we'll get going here. And obviously I know it's a shared screen here, it's on Zoom. If you've got questions, comments, anything, unmute and hop in here. I can only see a few of you on my screen here, but please, if there's conversations or questions, let's do that. Don't feel like you just have to let me kind of ramble on and do it at the end. So the Office of Student Support and Accountability. There's our mission statement. How do I define our mission statement? We're here to help. Okay, and that help can look a lot of different ways, because what our students face in their semester to 6 years with us, life's going to come up. Life's going to come up in one way, shape, or form. It's going to look differently for everybody. How we help is going to look differently for everybody. Within our office, we like to say, if people don't know where to start with us. If people feel like they have been everywhere and don't have an answer or don't understand the process and they haven't been with us, come chat with us. Like, our job is to try to know resources, to try to navigate situations. I don't think K-State has a resource issue on campus. We've got how do we have our students, faculty, staff, community members? How do they know what those are? How do they connect? Like, come chat with us. Like, we like to do that problem solving. That's one of our main purposes. Just really quickly, I share this just to kind of normalize things for the office and for folks that are working with us. Last year, we had about 3,200 students that we work with. That's actually balanced back out to about where we usually were before COVID. COVID numbers, we super spiked because we had a lot of those absence verifications going on. So who we served was about where we've been historically. Our student of concern numbers, you can see there that we had a pretty consistent tick up, and then we remained there about that 800-900 mark. And we're going to go more in depth here on that student concern piece and what that means and how we work with students through that those numbers. But I think just to kind of level set about where we're at with folks, why have we seen this growth? I think we started using Maxi. I think we made it easier to make student of concern referrals. I also think as a campus community, we've done a really nice job of actually like caring and saying, hey, if you know something, make that report, right? Like, we want to engage with students. We want to help out. We want to support faculty and staff who are working with students through things. So make that referral. So who's in our office? So you make a referral to us. Like, who are the folks that you're going to engage with? You got myself in the senior associate dean role, Laurel Moody, Janelle Rieger, and Allie Coleman. Those are the deans in the office. Kim Ybarra, Devin Walker, Amy Hall, those are our coordinators in the office. And then to highlight Kaylee and Steph, case management is new. Last year, it was new to us. They are housed out in our housing and dining community. Our case managers are an amazing resource in that they're there to work with students that might need that weekly connection, that skill building, that navigating the waters. Here's your to-do list of 10 things. Kaylee and Steph are going to work with those students in kind of that high touch, let's keep a student on track component. When we set that position up, we thought a lot of first-year students that live in housing are going to utilize this. We are finding that it's that population, but it's a lot of our off-campus students that have been here a little bit that are still trying to navigate situations. So you can talk to any of us in the office. If you call the office, have a question, any of these folks are going to be able to answer a question and get you going in the right direction. Professional staff who are also housed within the unit, Sarah Barr. So part of student fees pay for a student attorney. So if you have a student that you're working with who mentions they maybe got a minor in possession of alcohol ticket, low-level drug, that they got arrested for a traffic violation or anything lower level legal, they can come see Sarah Barr free of charge. Student is having concerns with their landlord or roommates off campus, Sarah oversees an undergraduate student named Toddy in the off-campus housing support piece. And Toddy and Sarah can review leases, can hear from a student what's going on in terms of maybe the landlord isn't keeping their property up to code. Come let Sarah take a look at that. Sarah's going to be able to tell that student, like, nope, landlord's actually within their rights, or no, and here's how we address that with the city. Dr. Camilla Roberts with Honor and Integrity is housed in the student support and accountability area. And so it's a really nice fit because as we think about our code of conduct, honor, integrity, threat management, student organization conduct, that's all under the same umbrella now and all under that same reporting structure. So I think that's an important piece. If you've got any student concern, you just call our office and we should be able to get it pointed in the right direction or take care of it. So some items I want you to keep in mind today. I'd like to take some time to just give you where my frame of reference comes from, where we try to come from as an office and we're engaging students, because I think that's important. So when you call us, you're going to understand what we're kind of working through. Life happens usually at the worst times. We don't usually get a roadmap of like, here's when the wheels are going to fall off. That would be super convenient if we did, but to just understand that'll occur. We ask folks to meet students where they are. Sometimes not every student's in your class to get the A, right? Sometimes maybe that student's taking a class for the third time and they are just trying to scrape by and get the credit and get the heck on to the next thing. And that's okay, right? Like that's okay. Grace and understanding go a long way. When I present to GRAs, GTAs, faculty, staff, what I ask, and you'll hear this today, is life will happen for our students. Life will happen for us. And I think that as we're talking with colleagues, as we're talking with our supervisors, our partners, our friends, we all need some help from time to time. We all need some understanding. We're not perfect. To keep that in mind as we're engaging with each other. Students are in more than just one class or just your class if you're a faculty member. We talk to students about this as they're trying to get caught up to understand, like, if you're 2 weeks behind in 4 classes, well, for the next 2, 4, 6 weeks that it takes you to get caught up, you basically can say you're doubling your course load. So now instead of 12 hours, you're in 24 hours. And no one should take 24 hours, right? Like that's a lot of hours. And so as students come to you and you're giving them that grace and you're coming up with plans to help them get caught up, understand that may be a good plan for your 3 hours, but they're going to go have that conversation with 2, 3, 4, 5 other faculty. Thinking outside the box, being creative in kind of your solutions, paying attention to your students. Some of you teach very large lectures. I don't expect you to have a personal relationship with 200 students across 3 sections, but are there small things that you can look at, right? They're now late turning in assignments. They're not showing up to class, like their parents. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And also recognize not all crises are loud, right? I think we all can recognize the car accident when you run into another car, you're like, crap, that's really bad. But we're not paying attention to when, like, you're not taking, changing your oil or changing your spark plugs or making sure your tires are aired up, right? Like, it eventually can lead to your car breaking down. Our human crises are no different, right? So understand that sometimes there's some underlying issues that might be going on for a student that aren't necessarily going to pop right in their face in an immediate moment. Got a quick video here I want to show you. So we will. I'm probably going to have to unshare and then reshare with sound. So one moment. I did not click the share sound button.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, No, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Now, I'm sure that many of you have seen that, and actually, if you've seen my presentation, I know you've seen it. I think what's important on that front is, and what I'm asking, I think it goes back to that grace component that we were talking about, right? To just understand where people are coming from. I think what's really important as you're working with students, and as we work with students, I had a professor in my master's program who often spoke about, understanding other people's hurts or struggles. And if a student comes to you and says, "I broke up with my boyfriend or girlfriend or partner of 3 months and I'm crushed," and you go, "That's not a big deal," right? Because your life experiences for you, maybe that hits on a 3 on a scale of 10. But for that student, that ouch that's their 9, right? Like that's their biggest ouch. And to try to understand that in the overall scheme of life, unfortunately, that person may experience way harder things. But in that moment, that's their hardest thing they've experienced. And if we can try to put ourselves into those shoes and to understand, like, this is hitting hard for them, how can I support them versus discrediting their feelings or their emotions? Like, I think that's an important piece to try to keep in the back of your mind as you work with students. I think the other piece when we talk about empathy and having an empathetic response is it can be really hard to work with a person, whether this is a student or a friend or a family member, and you hear their narrative and you hear what's going on, and to take some of that on, to remember it's not yours to take on, right? Like in that moment, how do you support that person? How in that moment are you listening in a meaningful way? Are you sharing resources with them? Are you giving them that checklist to walk through? Are you giving them grace, whether that's with sure, you can have a week extension on this paper or whatever that looks like, to then know in that moment I gave them what I could, but then it's up to them to kind of walk forward, not for you to take it home, not for you to take it back to your office and then be held down by it, right? I think last year we were talking about this a little bit about like how folks in student life or SSA now do this work. And I think that's a mindset that we try to teach over here is you're going to meet with a student and then another student and another student and another student. And if you take just a little bit of those home with you, like you're going to get bogged down really quickly, right? And so the students that I take home with me are the ones where I go, I wasn't as focused as I needed to be. I realized I missed a resource share, or maybe I didn't get that email sent to Don to say, hey, can you work with this student, Don? That's a bad example because I don't have to email Don. I just know Don's going to work with students. So, but I think those are the moments of like, how do you give yourself in the moment, but also not take too much with you, so then you're bogged down in creating your own kind of crises as you're taking on somebody else's problems. So, recognizing the student in crisis. That's been up on the screen. You've probably seen it as I was chatting. But again, I think it's just those red flag moments, right? If your loved one, best friend were exhibiting these symptoms on the screen, right? Would you say something to them? Would you say, hey, you don't seem to be acting yourself, right? Or you're not carrying yourself the same way. If you can say, if my best friend were exhibiting these symptoms, I would say something, then that's the time you should be engaging the student, right? That's when you send the email and check in on the student. That's when you submit the student of concern. That's when you call me, you email me or somebody in the office and let us just kind of know what's going on. I think what's important too about when we think about what's on the screen and how you're relaying information to us, you're not tattling, they're not in trouble, right? Like it's a place of care, concern. If you go, well, I'm not sure that this is a concern or not, submit it anyway, right? Because that may be the next piece of the puzzle that we've already been gathering, right? Or maybe we've heard from now you're the second or third professor and we're like, wow, or from housing or whoever, and we've got a really elevated concern that we don't know about until we hear from people. And so just pay attention to folks, right? Like, are their grades going down? Are they late? Like we touched on a little bit ago, like this is how we just show care for one another as an institution. How do we assist them, right? Build on your established relationship. Again, I think if you're in a smaller classroom, if that's, or even a large classroom and you're comfortable having that rapport with students, that's awesome. If your rapport is more like, nah, I stand in front of the class and I'm gonna lecture, and that's also cool. But again, what's the grade book showing? Like, how do you do these things? Relate the observations. I think it's okay to say to a student, like, hey, man, I noticed, first 3 weeks you were right on time, you sat in the front row, now you're kind of in the back, you're sporadic with your absences. Maybe the student's just like, yeah, I mean, your class isn't that hard, and I'm focusing my energies elsewhere, right? Or maybe that's the door, that's the handout that student has been looking for to grab a hold of and say, no, I actually am not doing really great, right? Or you relate those observations to us, okay? Normalized help. Again, I start this presentation by showing 3,200 students. I share that with students, right? Because everyone needs help. Everybody needs support in some way, shape, or form, whether that's from OSL, whether that's from CAPS, Family Center, talking with an advisor. Everyone needs some support somewhere along the way for something. For you all, make the referrals, whether that's through your dean's office or your department heads, to us in the Student Support and Accountability Office, CAPS, Family Center, TELUS Health, formerly MySSP. All right, that's a new name, but if you have the MySSP app, it should have already switched to TELUS Health. Same functionality in that 24/7 online therapy piece, just a different name. Is the student housing and dining? Like, what are the other resource connection pieces? And this is what we're doing. When we get a student who lives in housing, we're going to follow up with an RA. We're going to reach out to a coordinator. If we know that they're employed somewhere and this is a broader issue, we're going to have that discussion with the student. That may mean we're talking with supervisors just from a helpful standpoint. Taking care of yourself. I don't care if you're an undergrad, a grad student, a tenured faculty, a staff member. Like, we all have to take care of ourselves, right? I think what Don say, I won't get your quote right, but I want to be busy, but not like in crisis. That's my reframing. Life is flying at us, right? Whether it's a work piece or a personal piece or anything, take care of yourselves, lean into each other, show each other that same sort of grace. What happens when you make a student of concern referral? So that's going to come into us. That's available online. You can call us, you can email us. We don't care how we get the information. You're going to have the ability to say, hey, is this a low, intermediate, or high concern, right? And sometimes you might mark it high and it's really low on our chart. You might mark it low and we're like, nope, that's high. Low and intermediate are going to go to our coordinators and whatever dean is on call that week. Higher, it's going to hit all 9 of those people that were on the screen. We're all going to get it, including Dr. Lane, Vice President and Dean of Students, because we need to engage that student, right? If you're marking high, that's typically there's some self-harm going on, some severe mental health, like there's a crisis for that student. So we want people to get a hold of that. We're going to email that student, phone call. Maybe we got to do a wellness check. If we've got a self-harming and no one's heard from the student for two or 3 days and we're like, nope, gotta check that out. We may call emergency contact, right? You all don't need to worry about that. You just need to get it to us so that we have the ability to engage, okay? That's just the reform. It's not hard. It's click boxes, right? Takes you less than a minute to fill that out. You can hop on our website. Our website's getting a complete revamp with the new name, and so this will look very differently. But there are tips and tricks and information on there. If you've got a student about who do I call, maybe I'm not ready to make a report, but I just need some strategies. Student of Concern Guide is available on our website. You can kind of look through that. It used to be a big red folder. All new faculty and staff got it, printed it. You got it in your hands. Now it's just an online guide. So please utilize that resource. Some policies and accountability. So we do the student support piece, which is the majority of what we do. We are also the policy office, for lack of a better word. We do have a threat management policy. So if you've got a student who's making threats or seriously disruptive, this is the policy that's designed to go very quickly. So you call me and a student says to you that they made a comment that they were gonna cause harm to another office on campus. You're gonna call the police, they're gonna call me, we're gonna do a threat assessment right away. If you're interested in that, learning more about the threat management process and policy and how that goes, we do have a training available. You can sign up through your HRIS. It's out there right now. It's a Zoom training in a couple weeks to learn about specifically the threat management policy, how we implement it. It actually gets you trained. So if you ever have to be on a threat management team, you get that experience. The 3010 policy, which is housed in the Office of Institutional Equity. Our relationship to that is Justin, Frederick, and I sit side by side. So when we've got a student who maybe has been alleged to have committed sexual violence, Justin and I jointly will meet with the survivor of that to share resources. So the survivor only has to tell their narrative one time. And then I'm listening through a threat assessment lens while Justin is listening through that 3010 lens. So I think that's really important for folks to know, like that close relationship that OIE and OSL have. There is a student social media policy that we oversee. Brand new this year is our student organization conduct policy. Significant change, bringing our student organizations into the university structure. We have not had that relationship ever. And so now if there are behaviors that are organizational behaviors at any of our 435 student groups, whether on or off campus, if it's an organized event and something occurs, we can hold the organization accountable. Also allows our student code of conduct, our OIE, our 3010, and our 3015 policies to be able to be engaged there when that hasn't been there in the past. So significant change. The student amnesty policy, again, I think is an important policy to point out. Students that, whether it's due to alcohol, drug, low-level hazing, witnessing bad behaviors, if a student comes forward to keep their fellow students safe, they could not face any sort of consequences from a policy perspective, because we'd rather, if a student has drank too much alcohol, you call for your friend. I don't want you worried about getting a code of conduct or a minor in possession ticket. Call, get your friend the help they need, right? So that's a new expanded policy at the university. Student code of conduct, if you ever have a student just issuing, concern in general, what I want you to see is there's a lot of policies here that we can apply. We also do a lot of just educational conversations with students, right? Like sometimes the behavior is not a policy violation. It's just how we engage in our new community together in a meaningful and positive way. We can have those conversations with students to help keep people on track so they don't end up in some of these other categories. If you ever have a situation, I think the /report website is very helpful, because all of these reporting mechanisms that we've talked about live on that page. So OIE, absence verification, student of concern, minor policy. There's about 14, honor integrity lives there. There's about 14 different policies on that page. So if you're ever like, I don't know where to report it, start there. You're gonna probably be able to sort that out. You can also just call OIE, you can call OSL. And of course, the CARE office is an amazing resource, confidential office. So if you ever have a student, faculty, staff who has experienced dating violence, domestic violence, stalking, sexual harassment, sexual violence, or as a secondary survivor, I've had students that are like, I know my mom's going through this. I'm not sure how to support her. They can go talk to CARE. CARE is confidential. CARE's got amazing resources, from a therapy fund to help students get therapy if they can't afford it, to going down and helping get protection orders if that is something that's needed. CARE does have a direct relationship with us. And so when a student needs like academic support, so some of those academic support letters, CARE lets us know, we send it. So it comes out of our office because we send those letters all the time, protects that student's identity and protects why they may be needing that support, okay? Oh, look at this, Don, I got a new video. We're really mixing it up this year. All right, so we're gonna play this one here. Oh, I'm muted.
Require notes or excuses for things from my students. If a student messages me and just says, "Hey, I just had some stuff going on, and I'm gonna turn in my paper next week," I can just be like, "Okay, I know what you're thinking." If you're either a current student or maybe a newer college professor, maybe even a more seasoned college professor, you're like, wait, no, I need my students though to specifically lay out whatever trauma they're going through. And then I need to pick that apart and decide whether or not that trauma or illness or hardship is good enough for an extension on this assignment. You don't need to make them go to the doctor to spend money they might not have on a note just for your class. If they're having a mental health crisis, you don't need to make them relive that whatever trauma they have right now. And you don't need to investigate. You're not a detective. You can just, do your job.
So that started floating around, and we talked about it in our office, and I think fundamentally, like, I agree with that, right? Like, you don't have to require all these things. I do understand though why folks require certain things. So please know that I'm not sitting here being like, just let it be willy-nilly. But I do think there are moments as we talk about grace, as we talk about support, like, how can we lean in a little bit to help our students out without making it, I think he talked about re-traumatizing them and going through some of those experiences. And so as we talk about the absence verification policy here, there are actually only a handful of excused absences in our policy, right? Military service, court appearances, pregnancy, childbirth, religious observance, and weather. Weather's easy. If the university's closed, then we're all excused. But I do think it's important to understand this verified absence category. So you will see two different types of letters that roll out our office. The excused absence, which are actually very few and far between. And then the verified, right? So technically, a student who has emergency surgery and is in the hospital for 4 days, it's not excused. That's not excused absence, but it's a verifiable absence, right? And so you can send a student to us, we will collect the doctor's note, and we will send out and say to these 5 professors, hey, this student was in the hospital, had their appendix out, right? Couldn't do anything about it. Could you work with them? That would be great, right? A student may have missed 2 weeks of your class, and you file a student concern report, and then they get connected with us, and the student says, you know what, I had a mental health crisis. I've been in bed for 2 weeks. Give that to us. We're going to have a very honest, realistic conversation with the student about, like, is this a good place for you right now? Do you need to go get some more help? We may email you, and we're going to try to be clear and say, hey, Don, met with this student. There's some stuff going on for them. We're not going to lay out all the details, right? Our hope is that that we have verified. We're not going to reach out to you on this kind of willy-nilly stuff, right? But if students miss 2 or 3 weeks, we say to a student, we'll reach out to try to open that door for you. But please know, like, you may not be able to get caught up in that class. Have the conversation with the professor. If that student legitimately cannot get caught up in your course, be honest with them, right? Let them know, like, that's not going to work, because that student might talk to 4 professors and 2 of them are able to work with them because the course structure just allows it. And we might be able to work with that student and say, let's talk and complete with the professor. Let's talk about a withdrawal. Sometimes you just miss classes and we don't have a good reason to kind of advocate. And so we talk about, what does a retake look like? Like, how do you, what's a, you know, for some students is it academic forgiveness if we're that far down the road. And so know that we're going to send information out to you that has been excused or verified, or that not everything in life is documentable. There's not always a doctor's note, right? There's not always an obituary. There's not always these things, but know that if we're emailing you, we're making an ask of you. Not a requirement, but again, from that grace perspective, from trying to have student success, from trying to help them get to that next piece. Sometimes that doesn't work in that moment. We get it. Don't be afraid to tell that student where it's at. I just think if you're coming from, have I done what I can, right, in a meaningful way, and it's still not going to work out, we get it, right? We support you in that. Sometimes professors, I think, are like, why'd you tell the student that? We didn't, right? Like, we're very honest with the students on those acts, okay? Some just general resources here. CAPS, again, 8 sessions a semester for students, free of charge. They have a new model that's been in place now over a year that's been really successful. A student can go in there between 8 and 4. They can see a therapist in the moment. It's about a 10-15 minute kind of intake meeting where then they may say, yeah, let's get you hooked up with individual therapy, may get you to group therapy, may have you do some online workshops, and then circle back to individual therapy. For some students, what's going on just would be a better fit at off-campus locations, and CAPS will work with them to help them through that transition. Lafayette Health Center and all the good resources that are going on there. Morrison Family Center for Wellbeing and all the kind of proactive well-being initiatives that are coming out of there. I forgot to add it on here, but the Let's Make a Pact, so the bystander intervention out of the care office is now actually housed in the Morrison Family Center for Wellbeing. And so that's a great program for folks to learn about how to be an active bystander in sexual violence or just really any situation to keep our students safe. The Family Center is also a great resource for our students. Cats Covered, I hope you've seen it, but if you haven't, brand new facility, an amazing facility. We are very fortunate to have this for our students. If you've not been in the new Cats Covered, it's worth pulling in the parking lot and checking it out, okay? We unfortunately have a lot of students with a lot of food insecurity. And so if you've got a student who says they're in need of some food, get them the Cats Covered. If you've got a student who's in need of, it feels like it's not just a one-time thing or an ongoing thing, shoot them to us too, so that we can talk about, are there some financial resources, whether that's through PowerCat Financial or through some emergency grants or aids through financial aid or other resources there, okay? Academic Achievement Center remains a really great option with academic coaches, study groups, tutoring, the Navigate reporting pieces that should be coming out pretty quickly here, I think, for progress reports this semester. Student Access Center, it's on everybody's syllabus, whether it's students with permanent disabilities or temporary disabilities, and amazing resources located here in Holden Hall. If a student ever mentions to you that they had, they have a hard time focusing on exams, or they had an IEP in high school, make sure you try to point them to the Student Access Center, or in fact, we refer to them every single day. The care office we've touched on. Obviously, the Morris Family Multicultural Student Center right next to the Union, an amazing facility. LGBT Resource Center is an outstanding center that's for faculty, staff, students to utilize that space, also located here in Holden Hall. And then, we can't list every single resource, but there's some kind of student life-y resources there on the screen for you. And just to recircle back on what we talked about today, the items that I want you to take away. Life's going to happen. It's just going to happen. Meeting students where they are, grace and understanding students who are more in your class, think outside the box, pay attention, and understand not all crises hit you right in the face, but there can still be a crisis all the same. That's us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can take questions and have some open discussion. Appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Andy. I'm gonna start out with a question. So we're in week 3 of the semester.
Yeah.
So what should we be looking for, particularly if we're teaching first-year students?
I think who said it earlier that like the first 2 weeks are just kind of like chaotic and fast, and hopefully we settle down after the holiday break. I think for us with first year students, it's kind of a weird balance. I think we got this honeymoon period um, where yay college, right? It's all the positive and good. Mixed with that, it's still an extreme transition time period those first couple weeks, and so some students are just spinning and don't know what's going on. I think where we are now, the reality is going to settle in. Right? So the reality of these are a lot of classes, these classes are hard. Wait a second, it kind of isn't that fun being 3 hours away from home, or my roommate and I aren't actually connecting, and we aren't going to be in each other's weddings, or it's harder to make friends here than I thought. What I would encourage you all to teach first year students is where can you give them a checkpoint in a safe space, right? Whether that's a note card in class, whether that's a private like post to you as a faculty member. Like I think our students want help. I think they're okay asking for help if they're given the opportunity. I think is it now, or can you showcase to them, okay, we're through the first couple of weeks of honeymoon. Now let's talk about your resources. Midterms are about ready to hit, and some of them are going to get smacked in the face real hard with how hard college exams can be. And so what I would just be looking for is, some of those signs that we talked about. But what I would hope is that you're just given the space for them to be able to say, I'm not doing super awesome, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate the realistic kind of duality of that situation. One of the things that also does concern me is the students who won't accept help or ask for help. So especially, and this is what motivated my question a little bit, if you're the first year student, especially the first generation student, right, you might be letting down the family's dreams, right? If you're kind of struggling in college. So they might not even be telling their social support systems at home, let alone us. So I'm kind of wondering if you have any kind of tips or recommendations for that sort of situation.
Yeah, I think for me, that's why I spend so much time talking about normalizing the help and normalizing that it's okay to not be okay. Like, no one's walking around here 100%. Or if you are, awesome. Like, congratulations, kill it. Like, I'm pumped for you. But I think the reality is we've all got our stuff, whether that's that's really super disruptive to our life, or we're able to manage it pretty well. And so my hope, and this is a little like idealistic, is that folks are having a conversation about like, yeah, that kind of sucked right now, or like, I'm not doing super great. Or is there a moment of vulnerability, like as a professor or a staff member, to be like, how was your weekend? My weekend actually was not great, right? Like, my lawnmower broke down, my car broke down, my cat, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to list all the bad stuff. But like, how was your weekend? Good, right? What the hell's good mean? Or it actually wasn't that good, but here's how I'm going to deal with it. And so I think it's okay to have some of those vulnerable moments. I think especially, Don, you bring up a really good point for our first gen students. Are they fully aware of the resources available to them? Not just our first gen students, right? I think all students, we fire hose them. I think we've gotten better with orientation about trying to be more intentional about how we roll resources out. People aren't listening to the helper resources when they're in the honeymoon phase, right? The honeymoon phase, life's gonna be great, right? I love professors that bring us in to present. I would almost flip it and say, bring me in at week 4 and 5, right? Because the honeymoon phase, no one cares about student life, because I'm not gonna have an issue, right? Week 4 and 5, oh crap, I am having an issue. Oh, I didn't know that was a resource. And so I just think it's, how are you as professors like doing that check-in? And it can be a 30-second check-in, right? Hey, just so you know, remember there are helper resources. Maybe you highlight a resource at the start of every class. I don't know. But if we can normalize that within our community and lean into it, and then most importantly, when a student does, if they are actually reaching out, how are we responding in a meaningful way so they don't get turned off? Like, I hate it when a student, this doesn't happen often, but when a student's like, yeah, I told so-and-so, and they said basically tough crap, or like, no, you can have the extension, they're off now, right? Like, they're probably not gonna ask for help again. So how do we as a campus community hold each other accountable to make sure when a student does ask for help, somebody is like, I can't help you, but these folks can. Like, I think that's an important handoff.
So Andy, I'll ask one more and then I'll open the floor to questions from our colleagues. I just, you know, this doesn't probably apply to anyone who has voluntarily come to this session. But for those people who are maybe seeing this as something that, you know, there's no place for this in my class, you know, I'm not qualified or interested, you know, and kind of having this additional responsibility of taking care of the well-being of my students. What's the response to that colleague? Because those colleagues exist in droves, you know, on campuses like ours. So what's the response to that colleague versus maybe the ally who came to this presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you all coming. Like, this isn't necessarily the group that I worry about, like you talked about, because I think you're here for a reason. You know, and Ashley and Noah have heard this multiple times. Like, when I talk to the GTAs, where I'm like, karma will get you, right? Like, if you don't help your student, karma's going to get you, and that's just me being a smart aleck. But as we have those discussions with professors, whether it's a colleague or with us, I think it's just, I try to tackle it from that place of like, we're all people on this planet. We're all humans on this planet. And if you can engage, or at least, I don't need you to try to get in your students' lives, right? Like, I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just asking you to make sure they're aware of the resource, make sure they're aware that if they need something, there's somebody they can turn to. Like, bare minimum, if on syllabus day, say office student life is here, like, just know it exists. So I also think there is a component here where if we can engage a student as they're first starting to kind of have some concerns, it's going to reduce the overall potential disruption to that professor's life in the long run, right? Like, if they see that student kind of sliding, then they can proactively hand that off and we can lift that student back up. Well, now maybe that student doesn't miss the exam down the road and they're asking to have an exam made up, right? Like, now maybe that student hasn't been kind of had discussions with others in the class and it's kind of causing a ripple effect. And so I think those are kind of what are some real world examples where you engage a student and it actually helps benefit your classroom versus causing additional disruption to the classroom. Don, I think there's a conversation you and I have had before, or we all have had, about like, how do we break through? And I think the unfortunate answer is we got to kind of break through at a one-on-one, slow and steady, consistent conversation component there. And I don't have a clean answer on it other than we just got to keep doing the good fight.
Thank you. And now if anyone else has any conversations, you can unmute yourself if you can ask. If you're not in a position to say it out loud, want to drop it in the chat, I will say it out loud for you. But what questions do we have for Andy?
I actually just wanted to jump in with a quick suggestion of going off of what you both were just talking about, is how to like get your colleagues kind of on board, or how to like connect with your students really quickly. I will sometimes at like a couple points throughout the semester give a quick Qualtrics form to the students, where you can just put the QR code up to it. The students can do it on their phone. It's like, you know, how are you feeling in this class? And you have like a Likert scale of 1 to 5, like awful, fantastic. What's something that you're really proud of in terms of your progress? And what's something that you're really concerned about? I have a lot of students that, like, they're just not talkers. Even if I say like, oh, I'm not doing great, how are you guys doing? I know it's tough. Or like, you know, even like trying to demonstrate that, some students just don't open up, but they will put it in writing. And so that can help to catch some of those students that are like, things are rough, and they'll put it in a Qualtrics, but they won't necessarily say it out loud. And then that gives me an opportunity to go in and grab that student and say, hey, I saw in your response that you're struggling with this thing. Here's some resources for you. So and it takes like no time. You can do it at the beginning of class, give them like a minute or two. So that's just a quick way to connect with students.
I love that. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to share this one. I'm going to share it. So in Navigate, we are getting ready to pilot in the spring. It's just going to be a few offices, but the hand raise feature, to where a student can say, like, I know OSL is going to be one of the pilots. I think PowerCat Financial and Academic Achievement Center. You know, I may say, I need help with tutoring, and the student literally can click the button and it's going to send an immediate message back and we're all going to get to build. I'm having this meeting tomorrow. We're all going to get build, like, what does that message say, right? So I imagine tutoring will list some tutoring resources, but then those offices will be able to proactively then reach out to that student in response to them raising their hand and saying, hey, I need these things. So like for us, we're trying to come up with, I don't know what I need, but I need something, or some generic things that then instantaneously get them some resources, but then we will proactively, it's kind of like a self-report student concern where it's just going to be a click of a button with a navigate. And so I think that's got some potential, I think, to reach our students in a meaningful way. So I'm excited to see what that pilot program over the spring looks like to then do a more full implementation down the road.
Other questions for Andy?
Andy, is there currently any efforts to leverage AI and machine learning to use a lot of the data that we have on students, their usage in Canvas, other things like that, to be able to maybe proactive?
To my knowledge, no. That does not mean that won't be a thing. I think something that's really exciting. Obviously, we've got the university strategic plan rollout on Friday. I think we all know that. And there's a lot of really cool, interesting things in there. I think there's going to be a lot of really great opportunity, Brandon, when we talk about how the traditional student life side and traditional student success side merging into one division, and getting some new staff members that are going to lead some initiatives for some of those ideas like that, Brandon. I know Dr. Lane is very interested in how are we building our retention and our care for our students and utilizing that data, right? I think we don't have a data shortage. We have a how are we actually meaningfully using the data. And I think that's a great idea. So I would forecast that probably down the road, something in that family will be coming. I just don't have a hard.
I'll shoot you an email. Let's have an offline conversation. I've got some ideas.
Love it. Yeah. I am not a group question asker. And so if any of you have questions, offline conversations, anything like that, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would much rather have a conversation and answer the question or get some new ideas than not. And so don't hesitate to shoot an email. And I think Nathan's hand is raised.
Hi, yeah. Thanks for the presentation. Do we have like a one-page cheat sheet of all the resources in a brief blurb that you could send to us and we could print and hand out on the 4th week of class or the 6th week or whatever? Right? Is there something they get during orientation that's like that we can just redistribute if they're not keeping that, which I assume they're not?
I don't. We've got an internal one that we use for students. Let me check on that, Nathan, just to see, because that's a good idea. I do know a couple of years ago there was a Canvas course that was developed for students that they were auto enrolled in. I think that was when Dr. Stephanie Bannister was here. I'd have to do some double checking to see if they're still auto enrolled in that or not, unless somebody on this call happens to know that. Let me do some checking on that. I know, like I said, we've got this really pretty sweet, just internal guy that when we meet with students, we circle all the resources for them with their action plan that they go out and tackle. And I'm curious if we can put something together to distribute, even electronically, that y'all could email out. But let me check with Holly over in new student programs and kind of see what maybe already exists or needs developed. That's a good idea.
Thanks. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
So I want to just repeat what Andy had said, is that this is the start of a conversation. This is not all you ever need to know. And as kind of student situations emerge, reaching out to Andy's office, he'll provide some guidance so we can connect our students to the resources that they need. Because if they're not well, they can't learn. So I think it's something we've got to be really, really attentive to. So please join me one more time in thanking Andy for his wonderful presentation today. We do appreciate him continually getting invited back to the series, and he earns that return invitation. So it's really awesome to see that. We'll have a post-event survey that will drop in the chat for you, where we talk to you about the certificate opportunities. I also want to remind you that next week, Serena Maniotis is going to be talking about what job design can tell us, about online teaching and learning, something that many of us are very interested in. So as always, thank you so much for being part of our professional development series today. We'll see you next Wednesday. Same bat time, same bat channel. See y'all.